Ladies and gentlemen, fellow NATO veterans, it is an honor to welcome you all to this insightful video interview as part of the NATO Veterans Initiative NAVI Research Institute discussion series. I'm Dr. Sedat Çevikparmak, the chairman of NAVI, and I'm truly delighted to have the distinguished presence of Professor Mark Eyskens with us today. Professor Mark Eyskens is a Belgian politician, an esteemed academic, an accomplished economist, and a prolific author. His wealth of experience and expertise makes him an invaluable voice on the pressing issue we're here to explore, migration. As we all know, migration is a complex and multifaceted topic that intersects with geopolitics, human rights, economics, and social dynamics. It is an issue that impacts nations, communities, and individuals around the world. At NAVI, we are committed to fostering meaningful dialogues that transcend boundaries and bring diverse perspectives to the forefront. Our mission is to engage thought leaders, experts, and influencers in discussions that address critical global challenges, and today's conversation is a testament to that commitment. Throughout his distinguished career, Professor Mark Eyskens has demonstrated a deep understanding of the complexities of migration and its far-reaching implications. His insights today have the power to illuminate the nuances of this topic, offering us a comprehensive understanding of its causes, consequences, and potential solutions. I encourage you all to actively engage in this dialogue with your comments and feedback when you watch it, as we delve into the various dimensions of migration and its significance in the contemporary world. Let us embrace this opportunity to gain insights, challenge our perspectives, and collectively contribute to a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities that migration presents. Dr. Cihan Aydıner, the director of NAVI Research Institute, and Mr. Ümit Kurt, the deputy director of NAVI Research Institute, are joining us today to conduct the interview. Without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce Professor Mark Eyskens, who will share his valuable insights and perspectives on the topic of migration. Thank you again for joining us, and I'm confident that this conversation will enrich our understanding and contribute to the global discourse on this critical issue. With that, I will leave the floor to Dr. Cihan Aydıner to start the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Çevikparmak. Welcome again, dear Professor Mark Eyskens. I want to talk about migration topic. As you know, migration has become a critical topic, intertwined with security concerns in the context of global geopolitical dynamics. As an accomplished economist, professor, and politician with a deep understanding of Belgium's political landscape, we are eager to hear your insights on how migration impacts European security and its relevance to NATO's agenda. My question is, throughout history, migration has been influenced by various factors, including armed conflicts. Drawing from your personal experiences during World War II, how do you perceive the interplay between security and migration, and how can NATO effectively address security-driven migration challenges in contemporary Europe?
Well, the link, of course, is extremely important and also visible. Migration is indeed, as was said, a complex phenomenon, and today it has become a global phenomenon. We have to explain to public opinion that migration is one of the fundamental laws of human behavior. You know, humanity started somewhere in the Olduvai Valley between the border of Tanzania and Kenya. There emerged the Homo sapiens 300,000 years ago. And very soon, this small group of human people, they started to immigrate to other parts of Africa, and later on of all the continents. I'm a European, and I've been in the United States several times. I've studied there many times. And when I was traveling somewhere in the Middle West, in deep America, people ask me, where are you from? I never said I'm from Belgium because that's too small a country. When I say, of course, today I'm from Brussels, that they know what it is and where it is. No, I said, I'm a European. And then my interlocutor often said, oh, you're a European, then you are a Caucasian. Because they learn at school that the origin of the Europeans is Caucasia. All the Europeans today, most of them, their ancestors emigrated from Caucasia to Europe. So we are all immigrants and we are all immigrants. It's very difficult today to convince public opinion of that truth. And of course, today, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the enlargement of the European Union, the integration of 27 members, this has become an open space and people are moving. And we have to make, as far as Europe is concerned today, the distinction between Europeans moving within the European Union from other members on the one hand, and people coming from outside the European Union, for instance, from Africa and from other parts of the world, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Asia, and so on and so on. My truth is that immigration has become also a strategic weapon in power and in the hands of big powers. And then I look at Africa. In Africa, the population is exploding. There are 2 billion people living in Africa today. In 50, 60 years from now, 4 billion. If in the meantime climate heating continues and the desertification of agriculture continues and there is general famine, what will happen to all these poor people? They will move to the north because they think that Europe is still an El Dorado, is a paradise with the mild climate and with large social allowances. So there will be a massive emigration from Africa to Europe. What will we do? It's my opinion that some countries in the world, and I will call them with their name, by their name, Russia, and perhaps even China, they will promote that kind of immigration of African people to Europe because they know there should be an invasion of Europe that could be the cause of disruption of European society and completely disturb, even threaten Europe with disappearance as a civilization, because such a massive immigration in Europe of Africans, not only 20 or 30,000 a month, but 300,000 and millions a year, what will we then do as Europeans? And how will our democracies react? Extreme rightist nationalists, they will say, no, that's impossible, it's totally unacceptable. And what to do? If we can't stop them, well, then we just will shoot at them. We will bombard the boats that bring the poor people from the coast of northern Africa to the south coast of Europe. So this could create a totally disrupting situation. So it's of the utmost urgency to think about solutions. And there is a major essential link between the management and the monitoring and then the management of climate change and the immigration problem coming from Africa mainly. So we're lucky in Europe, most European-minded people, that Mr. Timmermans, the Vice President of the Commission, launched his Green Deal with respect to try to master heating of the climate and the consequence. And it has been largely accepted also by the European Parliament. We just have now to realize all this. But as I'm concerned, there was one big chapter not even opened in the Green Deal of Mr. Timmermans. That's Africa, an African policy, a policy able indeed to stop a huge potential immigration from Africans to Europe, to stop that. But how? Well, by applying the Green Deal and the limiting of the heating of the earth in Africa as a major priority, and by making the Africans participate in all the new technologies of mastering climate heating. And second, of course, to invest in Africa in such a way that they guarantee their way of living materially. Food, water, elementary comfort, elementary what? Of course, we should do that in a deal whereby also Europe could get some advantages in terms of raw material import of essential strategic products we need today, particularly in the development of high technology. So I have studied a long time ago already the Charter of the United Nations, 1945 or 46, and in that charter there is a very nice chapter called trusteeship. It was used after the war to give to Belgium the trusteeship over two ex-German colonies, Rwanda and Burundi. And we developed these two countries. Well, of course, today you cannot speak about trusteeship. This has a colonial flavor, but you can speak about partnership, and a partnership aiming at indeed realizing a new kind of Green Deal with the major input also of strategic investment. And I think we should try to promote this idea in Europe to consider the Green Deal of Mr. Timmermans as just one big chapter, but we need another big chapter about the development of Africa, with stressing also the importance of a Green Deal in favor of the African population.
Thanks so much for your insights. I want to turn back to Mr. Ümit Kurt and continue about this topic and policies.
With your exceptional background, including your tenure as the Prime Minister of Belgium in 1981, uniquely positions you to comment on the evaluation of migration policies and their impact on the European societies. As the 2024 European Union elections approaches, migration remains a key topic, as you mentioned before, as a strategic weapon in the hands of the global big powers, and with its potential ramifications for the European stability and the cohesion. My question is, over the years, migration management has been a complex issue for the European countries and institutions also. Then how do you assess the role of Frontex in the mitigation security risk posed by the irregular migration? And what improvements do you believe are necessary to enhance its effectiveness in the safeguarding European borders?
Well, the merit of Frontex is to exist. But of course, it's not an ideal structure. There are very many loopholes in the European border, I must say. And in order to control these borders, particularly in the Mediterranean, it would require a Frontex with the importance of a big army. It would be also very expensive. So when I tried to add to Frontex other structural elements which have been original, sometimes successful and sometimes failures. The idea was to convince countries around Europe on the border also to welcome migrants coming from Libya or even from Asia. And the first country with which we concluded an important agreement was Turkey. It was about a big amount in money and an important number of people. And it succeeded rather well, unless all the criticisms and so on, and the demagogues. But it was worthwhile to try it. I don't say it was perfect, but it's more a success than a failure. We did a second important try very recently with Tunisia, and there it is a big failure because the agreement was not sufficiently precise and because it was not a real partnership. And we have also, as Europeans, of course, to insist on the respect of human rights and the control of that. So if we negotiate such an agreement with other countries in Northern Africa or in the Middle East, we have, of course, to introduce in the agreement a mechanism of controlling the way it is particular as far as human rights is concerned. Because if we don't do that, that would mean then openly that we sacrifice our essential values to just material interests. So we have to improve, but in context should be complete kind of negotiation of agreements of welcoming migrants in other countries, and we pay for it. This is to the advantage of the country, of the hosting country. So we have to continue. Of course, within Europe, when we speak about migration and solidarity, immediately you have differences of opinion because voters in the 27 countries react in say, rather egoistic ways. In Flanders, we have also now electing the Nationalist Party, and the slogan of that party is "Eigen volk eerst," my people first. And many people walking in our streets, if you question them, they say, well, of course, that's quite normal that our people come first. Family, friends, colleagues, the citizens of our city, and of course our nation, my people first. And there is a former president in the United States claimed from everywhere, America first, nationalism, protectionism, collective egoism. This, of course, is absolutely deadly if you want to build a structural solution for the problem. And democracies show also their weakness because voters also often give Darwinian instincts, survival of the fittest, and all the weak people, well, that's not our business. So it's rather worrying that in Europe, if you look at the political map, in many countries, there is a tendency towards the right and extreme right, also on the theme of migration. And the most worrying for me is today what's happening in Germany. Germany first has some economic problems that are very serious. And second, indeed, the extreme rightist party, Alternative für Deutschland, AfD, according to the opinion polls, is making spectacular progress. And in this country, well, we all know what happened in the 30s of the previous century. This is indeed extremely worrisome. Yeah. And I see the same tendency also in France. Most people are saying that Madame Le Pen will be the next president. And well, also even in Belgium, where the nationalists are also in favor of Flemish autonomy, and that Belgium will be split after the elections of at least in a few decades. So the whole problem of immigration, which is a fundamental problem, has to do with civilization, has to do with morality and with values, is exploited in a most vulgar way by demagogues, and they are threatening democracy.
Well said, Dr. Eyskens. Right now, I would like to turn our attention to the upcoming elections, the 2024 EU elections. I'm curious, how do you foresee the election outcomes affecting the migration policies in Europe? And also, the second part of my question is about how you think NATO should react.
Well, this is a very important remark you're making. Since many years, I'm convinced that NATO should not only maintain its its military power and high technology and so on and so on. And Article 5 and that solidarity is very important. That NATO should also evolve towards the expressing of societal values. The military power is not the only that can stabilize a society, but it's complementary with other values. And indeed, why should NATO not also propose some solutions in terms of integrating immigrants, even in some armies? And in fact, this is the economic aspect of the whole problem. When you look at the labor market in Europe, most countries, there's an extreme shortage on the labor market. It's very strange. We are in a period of unemployment zero, even negative. So this is an opportunity, of course, to integrate so-called economic migrants. We have to make distinction, of course, between the economic migrants, the political migrants, and the climate migrants. But as far as the economic migrants is concerned, the Union, with the 27 members, has to develop a common policy of integrating economic migrants that are ready indeed to work, that can work. They have to be, of course, educated. They have to learn the language. They have to learn a lot of things to do, technology, and so on and so on. And they can be integrated. And this could also be, I think, the case at the level of the army. Not in the first place in order to learn to shoot with very dangerous weapons, but just in the army. There are also a lot of jobs that have nothing to do with the use of arms. So NATO could indeed propose elements in the solution. And NATO, of course, could play also a big role in making Frontex more efficient and more powerful, without, of course, shooting, but indeed protecting our borders in a way that is credible. And you indeed an important chapter. Yes.
Professor Eyskens, I want to talk about some leading migration scholars' views on topic. As you know, for example, Stephen Cassels highlights how Western democracies sometimes collaborate with autocratic regimes to manage migration. These relations are raising questions about the prioritization of short-term interests over human rights and broader historical context. Given your expertise, could you share your perspective on why Western policymakers adopt this approach and allow autocratic regimes to weaponize migration?
Well, it's a fact that indeed autocratic regimes weaponize migration. They use it as an arm against the United States, against Europe, by organizing a kind of flood of migrations in Europe and in the United States that is absolutely unbearable and that will destroy our democracies. This is an extremely important danger. Of course, we negotiate agreements with governments outside the Union that are not perfect democracies, that even may be autocracies. But you only talk today with countries that are pure democratic regimes, well, then, of course, you have, I think, to put question marks behind the names of the most members of the United Nations, except 50 or 60 countries. Let's hope that indeed the idea of democracy will evolve throughout the world and make the world better. Let's be also realistic. I think that democracy in a country like China or even a country like India will always be quite different from what a democracy is in a country like Belgium or the Netherlands or even all European states. So we have to take into consideration the diversity in the framework of the concept of democracy. The essential is the respect of basic human rights. The way this is done, but we have to to stick to that basic values. That's essential for Europe. Otherwise, we will not only lose our face, but also our souls.
I want to go again with the same topic before the second question. The first question is on an article released by the Foreign Affairs 2 days ago, titled "Supporting Middle Eastern Autocracies Won't Solve Europe's Refugee Crisis" by Tim Gratis. In this article, they are here very clearly indicate what you said actually, because it says the autocrat regimes will not serve in favor of the European Union. Instead, the European Union's cash for migrant control policy, and instead all kinds of, let's say, being blind with these autocracies, human rights abuses like that. From that point, is there any other way for the European Union, any other way from the cash for migrant control to collaborate with these regimes to counter with the migration crisis? Or this is the only way that the European Union has to follow?
Well, some say that negotiating a separate agreement with more or less autocratic regimes about migration is very unstable, and that we should integrate a chapter about the treatment of migration in our negotiations with these countries in a much broader pact. What I would call indeed a partnership, a bit in the logic of what was the trusteeship in the original Charter of the United Nations. Migration, if you look only at migration, then of course you are, should I say, provoking a kind of very sharp reactions in terms of resistance, our people first, nationalism, and so on. If migration is only a chapter in a much broader agreement, then it could be, I think, better integrated in the policy and of the hosting country and of the European countries. But that implies that indeed the Commission, with the support of the member states, would be able to use that and to do that. And then we could try to negotiate with well-chosen third countries. I think Turkey is a good partner. We have some criticism as far as Turkey is concerned, but in any case, it is an important country. It has the great advantage to be a bit a mediator. United States on the one hand, Russia on the other hand. So this is an asset, of course. Turkey is playing the role of a bridge in between West and the more like Russia. But of course, I think that in the world of today, the global world is our village. We have also to think of a review of the functioning of the United Nations. Mr. Guterres is a very good Secretary General. They make nice speeches, but it always remains a bit theoretical, to that extent even a bit romantic. Nice guy, speaks well, but where are the acts? And the acts do not follow his words, because the Charter of the United Nations is totally passé, as the French say, by the reality of the world of today. The United Nations Security Council is a purely political council, and I mean that political in terms of power game. We should also be able to introduce in the United Nations basic elements of economic policy, because economic policy is also an element in international strategy. Weapons are important, but also economic sanctions, and also trade relations, and the exchange of high technology. Where are we going to produce the chips of the future? As you know, that Taiwan is going to make a huge investment in Germany. Bravo for the Germans. But what in the other continents, and so on and so on. So I think we have to revise all what was structured just after the war. The nations and also the basic treaties of the European Integration Union and NATO. And of course, the major obstacle in the United Nations is the unanimity. Perhaps we should enlarge the member states in the Security Council and introduce qualified majority vote QMV, as we are doing progressively and very carefully in the European Council. Unanimity is not longer required for all items in the European Council, and that's an important progress, yes, indeed, but not enough. And in the United Nations, of course, nothing is happening. It's always the same, and always the same vetoes, always Russia and always China. This, of course, is destructive for the image and the credibility of the nations.
Thank you very much. Let's a little bit talk about the European Union's efforts on the new proposed acts about the migration and asylum. Hosting immigrants has become an increasingly decisive issue in the bloc since 2015, as you know. And today, the proposed legislations concerning the distribution of the responsibilities towards migrants and refugees, in which European Union diplomats anticipate agreement with the European Parliament by February 2024, is set to coincide with the 2024 elections. The European Union's new Pact on Migration and Asylum, as defined by the Commission, aims to establish regulations and policies that foster a fair, efficient, and sustainable migration and asylum process within the Union. And the pact, this proposed pact, it's proposed in September 2020, as you remember, is designed to manage and normalize migration for the long term, providing certainty, clarity, and the decent conditions for people arriving in the European Union. And my question is regarding this effort to fair migration and asylum burden share in the European Union. But what's your assessment of the proposed legislation's potential to address the refugee crisis, as we named, especially as it focused on migrants and asylum seekers who have already arrived in Europe?
I think that the approach of the European Commission and the Parliament are rather constructive, of course. The European Parliament, we have also parties that represent extreme tendencies against migration. The first priority to make it also acceptable for many voters in the Union is to say, well, we have a lack of laborers. There is a fundamental shortage on the labor market in each country of Europe. So we need migrants, and we can prove by statistics that the migrants, for instance, in a country like Belgium, that are integrated in the labor market, they add each year 1.5 billion to GDP. That is an argument that's convincing for many people. So the more migrants you integrate in the labor market, the better your economy is doing. Second, migrants are human beings. We have to ask them to get integrated, to learn the local languages, to learn a job, to get a kind of technical formation, and so on. And today, that's more and more difficult given the progress of high technologies. So integration is necessary, but we shouldn't require from them to assimilate. There is a difference between integration and assimilation. Assimilation means that you ask from these people to become the same as you are. Belgians with the Belgians. No, that's a bridge too far. They may stay as Turks, Moroccans, Libyans, Indians, Pakistanis. They may, of course, practice their religions, provided the acts are not in contradiction with the fundamental constitutional principles of the country where they are. There are limits, but we have to say that we have basic respect for migrants. They may stay as they are. We are not requiring, we are just demanding integration. I can only add that as far as migrants is concerned, we are looking at migrants capable to work everywhere at all levels of competence. And the shortage can only increase. Our population is aging. There's a growing lack of young people. So young migrants which integrate in Belgium, they can stay here and make a career with their families. And of course, we have in a country like Belgium a very socially large policy for the families with children, with large social allowances. This is also very important for migrants. So the positive message is not totally formulated towards migrants. They made a big effort to come to here. Many of them have been exploited during their trip from the countries of origin, and the European countries have been exploited financially, physically, and if they come down in a hostile atmosphere where they were expecting exactly the contrary, then of course psychologically they are so demotivated. It's more difficult to integrate them in the labor market.
As our final question, Professor Eyskens, I would like to bring out the issue of America and Europe dichotomy in terms of migration policies. As NATO Veterans Initiative, NAVI, we're based both in Europe and here in the United States. And one of the things that we're trying to achieve is, at least when we think about any topic, we want to bring out the best from Europe and America, and have provide a platform where we can also think and talk about policy differences. Now, migration is very unique in this regard, I believe, because the types of migration, the risks and opportunities that both continents face is quite different, right? So you have United States in one hand, it's secluded from one of the, some of the hotbeds around the globe by oceans, but then it has its own peculiar type of migration from, Central and South America. But then Europe is just a different story. And we're allies. And how do you think United States policies is helping or not helping Europe in their effort to, to manage migration, and vice versa? How's Europe, you think, helping or not helping United States in that regard?
Well, we try that the migration in the United States is quite different from migration in Europe in many different aspects, and the origin of migration is also very different. I should say that the United States and their policy, as far as migration is concerned, building a kind of iron curtain along the frontier, the border between the south of the States and Mexico, for instance, well, it could inspire some rightist politicians in Europe, but it's not, from a moral point of view, very convincing. It's not the exact way to find a structural solution to the problem. Of course, I didn't want to make some criticism about the policy of a most friendly country, the United States, and criticize the policy of your former president. But the way it is done and the way it is formulated, at least I should say that is not the European style, and it is not even the basic European morality. What was more inspiring for Europe was not the way the United States are coping with the problem, but a much cited example is, for instance, Australia or even New Zealand. But these countries are so far remote from Europe that the interpretation of what they are doing is a bit more theoretical, I think, than real. No, I'm in favor of a genuine European oval and structural approach that is typically European and that takes into account the interests of Europe, the interests of our labor market, the interests of what is bearable for public opinion, and things like that, yes.
Thank you so much, Professor Eyskens. Your wealth of knowledge and experience has provided us with invaluable insights, allowing us to see immigration not only as a contemporary challenge, but as an intricate part of our shared human story. Your reflections on economic, cultural, and political dimensions of immigration have also shed light on the multifarious effects it has on societies, both receiving and sending societies. As we conclude this interview, it's our hope that the perspectives shared today will inspire further dialogue, critical thinking, and compassionate action in addressing the complexities of immigration in our world. Thank you once again for your participation, and we look forward to continuing these meaningful conversations that shape our understanding of the diverse and interconnected world we live in. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It was for me a privilege, and perhaps I didn't enough underline how important for us is also the link and the bridge with the United States. And NATO is an instrument of indeed that alliance, which is much more than a historical alliance. It is a human alliance, and we're to continue whatever to do, reinforce that alliance and to stick together. Thank you very much for the opportunity for me to express my opinion, my admiration for what you are doing. Thank you very much.